What mother wouldn't worry? What child wouldn't weep?
Welcome to WatchMojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 most dangerous countries in the world.
This is why we have decided to leave.
For this list, we'll be looking at conflict zones around the world. The violence, social upheaval, and corruption in these countries make them especially dangerous to many who live there or visit. There are many hazardous hotspots across the globe today. Are there others that should have made our list? Please let us know in the comments below. Number 10. Central African Republic. The Central African Republic has been in a state of unrest for decades, and every possible source of conflict is at play. There have been numerous attempts at military coups between 2009 and 2019. Despite being rich in natural resources, the country is plagued by corruption and inequality.
Caught in the middle are children, seeking justice any way they can.
Ethnic and sectarian tensions have ramped up violence, especially between the anti-Balaka militias in the north and the Seleka groups in the central regions.
Relations between Christians and Muslims have completely broken down.
Food insecurity and internal displacement run rampant, with millions seeking refuge from the conflicts. Both external and internal interventions by nonprofits, state actors, and UN peacekeepers have done little to quell the violence.
This is a country that doesn't have a functioning health system, security apparatus, the police, the army, the school system. I mean, it's in total collapse.
Over half the country still requires humanitarian aid just to survive.
It's a chronically unstable nation. All trust absent. The only currency that counts is fear. And things have never been this bad.
Number 9. Somalia. Somalia has been in a state of endless civil war since the end of the Reagan administration. Things were so bad, the government collapsed entirely in 1991, and Somalia was designated a failed state by the international community. There was a brief glimmer of hope at the end of the 1990s, but it was soon snuffed out. After 9/11, jihadist groups like Al-Shabaab and local warlords found a foothold in Somalia. The government has often responded with violent crackdowns and kangaroo courts without due process.
Western nations regard Al-Shabaab as a terrorist organization that's causing havoc and instability in the East Africa region. That's why they have been targeting their leaders with drone strikes, funding the African Union mission, and supporting the Somali government.
Repeated international interventions by African Union and Ethiopian troops haven't done much to shore up the humanitarian crisis. Millions still require aid. Somalia has also been ground zero for climate change, suffering years of drought and famine.
According to the UN, $1 billion worth of humanitarian aid is urgently needed. Far more funding would be flowing into the country if the Somali government officially declared a famine. But it's hesitating, worried that such a move could enhance Al-Shabaab's influence.
Number 8. Russia. Russia's internal situation is getting grim. Despite propaganda from the Interior Ministry, independent analysts are seeing a spike in violent crime and homicides.
But organized crime is still very much alive, so entwined now with corruption at local government level that the two can barely be told apart.
Poverty and inequality are on the rise, a result of both international sanctions and internal corruption.
It is like a cancer. They created such a system that has become cancer. Either you fight it, either you get it rid of and get it out of Russia, or it will eat the country.
The war in Ukraine has exacerbated political tensions, with crackdowns on dissent leading to protests and thousands of arrests. Thousands more have fled the country in fear for their lives. 17,000 Russian refugees arrived at the U.S. southern border seeking asylum in the first half of 2023 alone. Many countries, including the U.S., Canada, UK, and Australia, have travel advisories for Russia. Foreign citizens are at high risk of wrongful detention and imprisonment for use as political leverage. Number 7. South Sudan.
For many people across the country, they will have known nothing apart from war.
South Sudan gained independence from Sudan in 2011, but has been in constant conflict ever since. Hundreds of thousands have died in civil war and violence, and millions have been displaced.
U.S. sanctions and the independence of South Sudan added more challenges in managing the economy.
The country is armed to the teeth, but has a decrepit infrastructure and few social services. Healthcare and education are sporadic at best, and carjackings, shootings, robberies, and kidnappings are common. Foreigners are often targeted. Climate change-induced flooding has left millions on the brink of starvation.
4 years in a row now of historic floods. Waters unable to recede.
The situation is exacerbated by a flood of refugees fleeing violence and civil war in Sudan, also a very dangerous country, especially amid the conflict that began in April of 2023. The thousands fleeing genocide, bombings, and looting are coming in faster than aid organizations can help them.
People are running out of food and water, there are frequent power cuts, and more families are making the tough decision to leave their homes behind, in search of safety across the border.
Number 6. Iraq. Even after the Iraq War, the Middle Eastern country is still a hotbed of terrorism, crime, and corruption. According to the U.S. State Department, foreigners are at high risk of kidnapping and terrorist attack. The fragile power-sharing agreement between Sunni, Shia, and Kurdish forces has led to political upheaval over recent years.
Poverty and unemployment are on the rise.
Uprisings and sectarian violence have filtered through much of the country. Protesters have been killed, injured, and disappeared in government crackdowns.
The corruption floodgates opened in 2006 when the Maliki government replaced the Jafari government. There was a law in place before 2006 where a committee had to approve all contracts above $5 million.
Women, religious minorities, and LGBTQ+ groups have been targets for violence and governmental sanction. As the Tigris and Euphrates rivers continue to slowly dry up due to climate change, violence and displacement will likely only worsen.
And every year, thousands of people fall ill due to waterborne diseases.
Number 5. Democratic Republic of Congo. The Democratic Republic of Congo is a textbook example of the horrific legacy of European colonialism.
In 1885, the country became the personal property of Belgian King Leopold II, who made a fortune from the harvest of a much-prized resource, rubber.
Belgium's colonial military committed widespread atrocities, ravaging the country. After independence, it became a dictatorship under Mobutu, until his overthrow in 1997. Since then, the DRC has been in an almost unending state of war, both internally and with its neighbors. The government is incredibly unstable, leading to the proliferation of independent armies, especially in the eastern regions. Poverty, inequality, and poor infrastructure have led to surges in gang and terrorist recruitment. Violence is widespread, as is hunger and starvation. Over 300,000 refugees fled their homes in February 2023 alone. Epidemics like COVID-19 and Ebola are very hard to combat. Rebel groups deny access to humanitarian aid and frequently attack aid workers.
After years of painful conflict, few Congolese are likely to be holding their breath.
Number 4. Ukraine. In February of 2022, Ukraine was transformed from a nascent democracy throwing off the shackles of its corrupt past to a country embroiled in war. Unsatisfied with the taking of Crimea in 2014, Russia launched a full-scale invasion. To the world's surprise, Ukraine pushed back the Russian offensive.
Do not panic. We are strong. We are ready for everything, and we will defeat everyone, because we are Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine.
Since then, the countries have been bogged down in a vicious ground warfare in the east and south. The devastation has been profound. At least 6 Ukrainian cities were completely destroyed. This includes Mariupol, a city slightly larger in population than Miami.
3/4 of the population has fled. 100,000 remain trapped.
Even relatively safe centers like Kyiv are subject to missile attacks. Civilians have been intentionally targeted, and nowhere in the country is truly safe while the war rages on.
There is so much torment here, but it's mixed with a tenacious will.
Number 3. Syria. Syria has been in a complex, multi-factional civil war since 2011. President Assad began the war with a campaign of violent suppression against protests calling for his removal.
Do you think that your forces cracked down too hard?
They are not my forces. They are military forces belong to the government.
Over 500,000 people have died in the conflict, including a number killed in illegal government chemical weapons attacks. Millions have been displaced, and almost 7 million fled the country altogether.
Their plight has brought a new sense of urgency to diplomatic efforts.
The Syrian refugee crisis is unprecedented in its scale and effect on the European economy and politics. Syria's infrastructure has crumbled thanks to the war.
But their troubles are being compounded by a collapsing economy. It's a stark reality across the war-torn nation where 60% of the population are facing hunger.
In many parts of the country, healthcare and education are non-existent. Proxy fights between Syrian, Russian, Turkish, and ISIS-backed groups have led to many attacks on civilians. As of 2023, the violence rages on with no end in sight.
Please find us a solution.
Number 2. Yemen. In 2014, Shia Houthi militias launched a rebellion against the Sunni government of Yemen. The fighting continues into 2023, a conflict that is as much a proxy war between Iran and Saudi Arabia as it is a civil war.
With the continued fighting disrupting shipments of food and fuel from reaching the country's shores.
A Saudi-led coalition of 9 Sunni Arab nations have been conducting airstrikes in Yemen since 2015.
I advise the Saudi rulers to stop supporting those they have been financing for the past 60 years because it will not help them. The ones who will make real peace are the ones they're fighting.
The U.S. has sold them tens of billions of dollars in weapons, many of which have been used on civilian targets. Hundreds of thousands have died in the fighting, and hundreds of thousands more have died from ongoing famine.
3/4 of the country's population of 29 million are in need of humanitarian assistance.
Millions have been displaced from their homes. According to the United Nations Population Fund, 80% of the population requires aid to meet basic food needs. Peace talks between factions began in early 2023, but the humanitarian crisis remains dire.
Diseases, sewage, garbage. What on earth is this? This is shameful. We cannot even walk around the neighborhood. Sewage and waste have flushed into our homes. We are forced to scoop it out with our hands.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into Settings and switch on your notifications. Number 1. Afghanistan. Afghanistan has been considered by many to be the most dangerous country on earth since 2019, even before the Taliban returned to power.
The Taliban's return to power has changed millions of lives, especially the lives of Afghan women.
2 decades of post-9/11 warfare have left Afghanistan ravaged and severely underdeveloped. According to the UN, 97% of Afghans now live in poverty.
The country has become an open-air prison. This is the new Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan.
In the wake of U.S. withdrawal, strict Taliban rule has made circumstances worse. Under sanctions, the country's economy has utterly collapsed.
Those considered middle class now struggle to make ends meet. In this upmarket district of the capital, women wait for bread to be handed out. They're desperate.
Violence remains widespread, with terrorist cells still being able to find safe harbor. The imposition of Sharia law has led to public executions and the curtailing of human rights for women and girls.
The Taliban say the rights of boys and girls within Islam will be respected. But 1 year on, there's growing fear that girls who are learning to lead will be left far behind.
Flash flooding, severe drought, and earthquakes have only worsened this humanitarian disaster.